So the first thing is, this is really about animation and rotoscoping, to be able to take an image from a video clip and extract the individual frames from it. You're using two pieces of software, Davinci Resolve and Shotcut, mostly because Davinci Resolve has some nice effect tools for removing the line detection. The first thing is to cut the video down. Cropping it, and before you can do any animation, I'll find the best contrast in a video clip, trying to avoid poor contrast, so that will save you work later on when you go to get the individual frames. So what I'm doing here is I'll take this clip and I'll run as much work on the video clip to remove as much of the color and leave the lines, because what we want is the lines that mark out the animation. So then when the rotoscoping comes to do the actual artwork, the rotoscoping doesn't require as much, otherwise you're going to have a lot more work trying to trace out the outline of the image that you want. So what the first thing here is to get the line detection filter, and this will remove the color and just leave the lines. And then you add the second filter is to invert the image, so you get black lines on a white background by inverting the image. And then we have to adjust the contrast, adjust the threshold to try and minimize fine and tapering lines and get a very hard threshold. So we get nice fat lines to follow, thick lines to follow, that can be used to define the image when we get to rotoscoping it later on. Now we've got to adjust threshold to get the image, as much of the entire image as possible, and avoid too much of the two extremes. So we get the outline without too much of solid color in either the out or the in of the image. And having done that, we'll put the image into Shotcut, which is another, it's not as advanced as video editor, but it will enable to output at a lower frame rate, which cuts down the amount of work needed in rotoscoping. So you don't want too many images. If you go for 30 frames a second, that's a lot of work every second. So if you can get it down to 10 frames per second, that will reduce the amount of work you have to do. Shotcut is able to output JPEG images, still images. I'll mark the name of the images with a frame rate so you know what you're working with, and output that after setting the video. You set the video to the frame rate and then output it to the number of images you want, and it'll give you that number of images per second from the video. Once you have these images, we can now take it into a photo manipulation software. This is Paintshop Pro, which is somewhat old, but Photoshop will do, and you can work on the individual images. And if you've done the work right, you should be able to get the outline and find the outline and define each image. And if you can get the contrast correct, you have a lot less work to do when rotoscoping. And if it's done right, you'll get a pretty decent animation from a small clip of video without too much work. About 10 frames per second is usually the best from 30. Then you re-put your sound back in, or synchronise it if you've got to do lip syncing. So that's rotoscoping. That's the way the image is done. The most time consuming is the actual rotoscoping or working on the images. So as I said, 10 images every second, that's on the low end. The high end is to go for the full 30. You've got a lot of work there. Usually an animation will go from about 3 to 4 seconds in most cases, sometimes 2 seconds. Doing a large project, maybe a bit more, but this is a demonstration of what you can do. Most pieces of software are free, so we're not talking about using professional here. This is mostly free. So there you have it, rotoscoping and animations.
Is a little bit more solid. When you're drawing animation, it has to maintain the same volumes and weight.
Yeah, he doesn't like arbitrarily bloat and stretch. And like when he does stretch, he gets thinner.
Right.
So it's like, it's still the same amount of Daffy Duck, just stretched out or squashed together, as opposed to him just arbitrarily becoming a large or small character.
Exactly. The term for that in animation is called squash and stretch. And that's the exact principle, is that when he squeezes himself